No audio. No audio. Can't hear a thing.
Looking down into Yankee Stadium, and he moved to Hell's Kitchen. The building's still there. I visited periodically 300. You can't say Russian to a Belarusian because they don't like it. I'm actually of Belarusian descent, not a Russian descent, even though my grandparents spoke Russian. He started out as a junior art director, graphic designer in New York City. World War II hit. I mean, first of all, this generation doesn't understand how the younger generation. My dad was born in 1917. A year later, he got the Spanish flu and nearly died at 1 year old. And at 10 years old, the Depression hit, and he had no money for the rest of his early adult life. And 41, the war hit. So he spent the first 25 years of his life in one crisis after another. And that molded him. He was a Depression era mentality. He worked in a loading dock for $6 a week. My mom doubled his salary. She worked for the founder of Superman comic book. She was his executive secretary. And she worked on Madison Avenue, and her boss basically wrote Superman. And when they got married, he sent her a book saying, "I'm so happy you're marrying your own Superman." And we don't know where that book is anymore, unfortunately. So he was shipped out to Fort Knox, Tennessee, to be an infantryman engineer. And being a savvy New York kid, he realized that engineers had a very short life expectancy. And he saw a sign on the command post saying, Army Air Corps looking for a few soldiers. So he signed up, and as part of this timing, the base was quarantined because of some kind of outbreak. 2 hours before the test was supposed to be done in downtown Tennessee, Knoxville, the commander opened the base. My dad fled to the downtown testing post, took it, got into the Army Air Corps. 2 weeks later, his unit was shipped out. They were the first group to meet Rommel, and 88% of them died. So that's what I call good timing. If that base commander had opened up the base, I certainly wouldn't be here. He shipped out to Santa Barbara. He went to ground school, and then he was shipped out to Luke Air Force Base #1. I didn't realize that all the Air Force bases out here were called Luke or Thunderbird. I'm sorry. Yeah, they were all called Thunderbird 1, Thunderbird 2, Thunderbird 3, Thunderbird 4. And they all trained different nationalities. Luke trained Americans. I think Falcon trained the English. Thunderbird trained or Willie trained the Chinese. And there was one, and Thunderbird, I think, trained Americans too. So he was shipped out here to be a fighter pilot. And he was 6'2", 225, nice strapping young man. And I think he never could tell me. He washed out. I think he was too big for the planes. I did a shoot a couple years ago where I had to be in a Chinese World War II training plane. And I was like this. I could barely get into it with the canopy on it. So I think he was too big for the planes, maybe too heavy. But he became a pilot. And at the end of when he washed out, the commander came to him and said, "We have a couple of options. You can be a tail gunner, a navigator, a bombardier, or wait, you were a graphic designer. We're starting up a fighter pilot class yearbook. How would you like to do the fighter pilot class yearbook? We'll get a couple of people. Oh, and yes, and here's a camera, and you have to take pictures, design it, paste it up, print it, and deliver a yearbook every 6 weeks to 4 different Air Force groups, 4 different bases." My dad thought that was pretty cool. And since he wasn't that interested in being a hero. And he said, "Yes, I'll do that." And so he called up his girlfriend he said, "Why don't you come out to Arizona and marry me?" And so she came out, he picked her up at the train station. They went to the Lourdes Tower, got a hotel room. That afternoon, they went to Cantor Green, I think. He lived on Granada, got married because they weren't going to have sex without being married. And they went back to the Lourdes Hotel where my mom proceeded to be sick all day. So my dad traveled the circuit. because he had special gas rations, and he went from Luke to Thunderbird to Willie to Falcon and took pictures of everything. He realized that he wasn't making a lot of money, so he went to horse shows on the weekend with his new camera that the Army Air Corps provided, and shot girls with the ribbon and the horse's head and the cowboy hat, smiling. Got $1 for an 8x10. Make 10, 12 bucks on a weekend. It was big money. At the end of the World War II, excuse me, I'm not that old. I was born a week before the end of the war. My mom said at the end of the war, she said, I'm going back to Brooklyn to be with my parents. You can stay or you can come. I'm not going to live in Arizona. It's horrible. There was no air conditioning. I was born August 1st in the middle of summer with no air conditioning. So you can imagine, for you women who've had children, you can imagine what being in this kind of weather is and pregnant. So this is a long part of the story anyway. So he said, okay, I'll come disheartenedly. He told me in his later years that he would go from Brooklyn, take the subway into Manhattan, and go to Central Park every day and draw. And he'd come back at the end of the day and tell my mom that there were no jobs. And after 4 months of that, he called up, he went to my mom, he said, I'm moving back to Arizona, you can stay or come. He had managed to impregnate her a second time with my sister, so she didn't want to be left with 2 kids, so she followed him to Arizona. Joe Porter, who had Porter's Western Wear. How many of you are natives or close to natives? So you remember some of these places. Joe Porter offered him a job. He had met him at the horse shows doing his catalogs. My first memories of my dad was at 1838 East Cypress, this way about 2 blocks, in the middle of a farm field, grew corn. And it was a dirt road with 6 houses built on one side, on the north side, and farm fields. We had a split rail fence. My dad would literally put a saddle on the split rail fence in the middle of the afternoon, take one shot with an 8x10 with a 4x5 speed graphic, print it, develop it, print it, cut it out, paste it in the catalog. That was the sophistication level. My dad was not a great photographer. This past year, I have gone through almost all of his images, which numbers millions, 80,000 different job ads over a 50-year career. I've gone through, and the transition from being just like, he would take a 4x5 view camera and get in the middle of a room and go like this and point, the lines would go like this, and he would sell that. I mean, he had no idea. He just knew how to get an exposure and develop. In 1951, he went to Winona, Indiana, because his business was like, oh, I could do this. And he took a 6-week photo course, and that's where he actually learned how to take pictures. And from that point on, from the 50s through the early 60s, he grew. Now, it was great to be in business in Phoenix at that point, except for the weather, because there were only like 5 or 6 photographers in the whole area. So you could be a complete screw up, and you were going to get a percentage of work. By the 60s, my dad was the main shooter in Phoenix. And percentage-wise, and this is a complete guesstimate, he did maybe 15 to 20% of all the work in town. And I do, and I'm successful, and Rick's super successful, I do maybe 1/10 of 1% of the work in town. So not having competition was a blessing for him, and it gave him time to actually sort things out and learn the business. He grew. We lived at 1838 East Cypress. He started to make a little money. He bought a house for $7,000 at Palmcroft and 7th Avenue. 7th Avenue was a 2-lane street. And it was just like being on Palm Lane where Rick lives. And it was the same kind of, you could play football in the middle of the street, there were no cars. But it had a full basement. And his first 3 employees lived there, or worked in the basement. And we lived upstairs. And about 1954, 55, he built a brick addition to the back of the house, and he put an air conditioning unit into it. That's when my mom decided she might stay in Arizona. We would move all the photo equipment off to one side, roll out the beds, and we'd all sleep in the air-conditioned studio every night. So a little different time and a little different place. By the way, I'm just going to tell the story. And if you have questions anywhere along the line, I'm more than happy to answer them, because I do a lot of lectures and a lot of seminars, but I don't do this first time, so I don't have a real timeline. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures, and because I couldn't figure out, let's see. Some of these are real fun. I'll show you our house is 7th Avenue, if I can find it real quick. Well, this is, I'm going to work backwards. This is the Glory Studio, 4,000 square feet on 7th Avenue, 741 East McDowell Road. He built, this is when he was doing well, 1956. I was just a kid, but I remember him fighting with the contractor in the living room, and I remember screaming at each other. I'm not sure why, but it was a difficult building to build. And so this was his dream, and he got a lot of press, and it made him sort of a national photographer because he knew how to promote it. And he did talks all over the country about his new photo studio. And so this was started in 1956. This building was a goofy golf course. It was the last part of a pioneer family. She owned the land from 24th Street to 20th Street. Her father did it from McDowell to Oak as a farm. And she lived in the house where Photomark is, or was. And she basically her and her husband were moving to Oregon in their trailer. This was 1972, 73. They were elderly. My dad walked into to sign the deal, and on the wall are, and I just blew the artist's name, Frederick Remingtons, like 6 Frederick Remingtons. And I said, God, those are great reproductions. She said, oh no, they were given to me, my dad, by this artist. And my dad said, do you leave them here in the summer? She said, yeah, they're fine here. The house is 110 degrees. He said, let me call up Earl Bempson, or Walter Bempson, and get him, the chairman of the board of the Valley Bank, who has the largest Western art collection. Bempson nearly fell over when he saw them. He said, let us store these for you in the bank. And we sold it. We bought the building, tore out the goofy golf course. We built this building first, then we built Colormark, and we built Photomark. So from 74 to 78, there were 3 buildings built. They're all about 10,000 square feet apiece. We've sold the other 2 buildings now. The Photomark building is now Tether Tools. The Colormark building is now owned by Dieter Schaefer, and Nick Papagallos rents that space and rents it out to other photographers if you want a space to use. It's a great working space. And Rick and I talk about this space all the time. We've got another year or 2 or 3 in here, and we're not sure. My sisters want me to sell it, but it's my man cave. And I'm freaking out because I realize the end's getting close at the end of my career, even though I can go home and do locations, which is normally what I do. I think what I'm going to do is show you some pictures. And so that's the overview. My dad lived to be almost a couple months shy of 92. My mom's still alive. She's 101. And he wanted to be 114. He didn't quite make that. He sold out of his business 2 years before he died. He died in 2009, June 11th. And he was just a great guy. There was not an unethical bone in his body, and I think that's what people liked about him, is that he was never trying to screw anybody or do anything, and that's the way he lived his life. And the way this sort of happened, just to start, is last summer, in the middle of COVID, I got bored, and I'm on Instagram. And I started going out. It's like, well, it's time to start going through my dad's stuff, because I've given the negative file to the Arizona Historical Society, so they can. It's basically a visual history of Phoenix from 45 till 1985, and so I've given that all the files to them, and I started going through them just to see what, because I'd never really done that. And I just started in 45, looked at the oldest stuff, and I pull out a drawer at a time and look at it, and there was fascinating stuff in there. So I started posting some pictures. And people loved it. I mean, I was shocked. I had no job to post, so I'm posting pictures of my dad's 1940. And I do a lot of work for Arizona Highways. I've done close to 200, 250 different assignments for Arizona Highways. Robert Steve, the editor, called me and said, hey, Paul, I love what you're doing. Would you consider us doing a coffee table book of your dad's work? It all of a sudden took on a life of its own, and I said, sure. So Hopefully it's coming out mid-November. They're just about finished selecting. It has to be sent off to China to be printed, and it'll be in all the Costco stores. So hopefully, I mean, I'm hoping it gets out before my mom passes because she'll love it. But so it's, I think we're 5 or 6 months away from doing it. So anyway, this is the way this old stuff, in combination with me being old, my dad's old stuff started to take place. I'm just going to go back here. So my dad did it, I called it, he did grip and grins. You know what grip and grins are? Two people shaking hands in front of a building. And he made a fortune doing it. And because he was a good guy, the Democrats and the Republicans loved him, even though he was a lifelong Democrat. And so whenever a president would come to the United States, my dad would spend the day following him around. I've never shot a president. My dad shot them all. And
Photograph.
what? Photograph, yeah. I actually have a picture of Bobby Kennedy in a convertible that's early, looks like that I was part of, and I was on the roof shooting in Christown. My dad was on the ground, and it looks like the 63. I mean, it's like early. I don't think I'm even showing it because it's a little scary. So this is a very rare picture. This is JFK and Lyndon Johnson in one space at the same time. Presidents and vice presidents, I found out, didn't travel together. It was too risky, but they came out for Carl Hayden's 50th year in the Senate. So this is at the Westward Ho. And then the complete opposite. These are, that's Nixon, and right behind him is David Murdoch. I don't know, does anybody know who David Murdoch is? David Murdoch owed my dad money because he could never pay his bills. He built the Guarantee Bank building, the first 20-story building in uptown Phoenix. And he never paid his bills. And he sort of got such a bad reputation in Phoenix, he moved to LA and became the richest man in LA. He owned Occidental Petroleum, he owned Cannon Towels, he owned everything. He owned land in downtown LA, he owned everything. He was a multi-billionaire when it was tough to be a multi-billionaire. So that's him in the background. I guess he was a Republican too. Oops, sorry. That's John F. Long and Ronald Reagan. John F. Long used celebrities in his ad campaigns, and Ronald Reagan was his pitch man. I mean, he was moving up for him. He did 20 Mule Team Borax shows. He was not much of an actor. And so I've got pictures of Ronald Reagan in pickup trucks with the John F. Long thing hanging out, smiling. It was all over the place. So this is, and again, if you have any questions, this is World War II. My dad shot the base stuff. This is part of the yearbooks. He shot Jimmy Durante. He shot tons of celebrities. Dinah Shore, World War II. It's a little out of order. This is Gary Driggs from Western Savings. And Gary Driggs, along with Barry Goldwater, helped save Camelback Mountain. He put a height limit on what you could build. But he was a big spelunker. The story with Gary Driggs, I used to shoot for Western Savings. I was the first non-Mormon. Are there Mormons in here? I can tell the story. I was the first non-Mormon that Western Savings ever used to shoot their annual report. For years, they used anybody who was Mormon to shoot their annual reports other than anybody else who might be qualified. And I used newspaper photographers, and they called me one day and they said, we'd really like you to shoot our annual report. And I did a bunch of them for them. So through Gary, I met the Romney people, and they owned a bunch of Ramada Inns across the country. My first big assignment was shooting 39 Ramada Inns through 25 states around the country in 5 weeks. I got paid $150 a day to do that. It was a 6-page brochure. I got $200 a day. I traveled with 2 cases, a light case and a Hasselblad case, and I just went from hotel to hotel, places you've never heard of. But the Romneys liked me, and they were opening up a Ramada Inn at Lee's Ferry because in those days there were unlimited river days. And they were like, okay, we're gonna have a hotel where people can spend the night before they go down the Colorado River. So they sent me down there, and Gary and his daughter Becky and his wife were on the trip as models, and a couple other people. And I brought my first wife and I were on the trip. And the crew were a young couple, who I don't remember their names. They were Jack Mormons, and they used beer to make everything in their Dutch oven, pancakes, turkey. They just pour beer and everything. And I say, do the Driggs, I remember saying to them one morning, I'm watching Porter, I said, the Driggs know you're throwing beer in their pancakes? He goes, no, and you won't tell them.
Do you have any other photos from that trip?
Yeah. That's 73. This is our front door of our house on 7th Avenue. My dad did Prescott Sportswear, and they did the unthinkable thing. They made squad dresses, and we called them squad dresses. And we'd make catalogs and catalogs. They were a great client. So these are some shots in our house. That's in front of our fireplace. This was considered fashion. And if you see the people in the painting, that's my sister and I. Great find. And this is a house that's still there on the corner of Palm Lane and 7th Avenue on the northwest corner. It's still there, I think, right? I'm not sure what this is, but it was a giveaway. And again, when something becomes 60 or 70 years old, it goes from being a grip and grin to a photojournalism, just because of the styles and the hairstyles and the furnishings. So a lot of my dad's stuff is really quite memorable now, even though it's terrible photography for me. I'd be embarrassed to shoot this, but because you add 60 or 70 years to a photo, and it becomes really interesting. That's him in front of his Stearman. That's him at shortly before he died. He retired to painting. He went back to his first love of painting. I never considered him a photographer. I considered him a businessman painter. He had a great career in photography. Anybody know where this place is? This is where the Ritz-Carlton or the Cambria is. This is the southeast corner of Camelback and 24th Street. And this was owned by Jerry Lewis. And he used to perform there periodically. It was a big hot spot. There's Sky Harbor, Terminal 1, with our major hub carrier, Frontier Airlines. I think this is Cerritos Candy Bean. This should bring back a few memories to a few people that were here. It brings it back to me. This is this Encanto band shell. Unfortunately, this was torn down and they put in an awful part. They had a great part and they put in an awful part. This could have been improved, could have been made. Guys and Dolls, not quite Vegas. And I'd get $10 if I could get in that car. Beefeaters. So my dad shot everything. He shot architecturals, he shot celebrities, shot politicians, he shot landscapes. His big accounts were Valley National Bank, General Electric, Prescott Sportswear, Porter's, the Scenic Capri. Another thing that should never been torn down. This Celebrity Theater. This is the Bethany Theater. That's when the airport was packed. You had to wait an extra 30 seconds to get on your plane. And I love the Constellation. I actually flew in a Constellation with my grandmother from Phoenix to New York City in 1958. In the day, and again, since most of you are a little bit older, I can say this, in the day, my dad would, in the summer, my dad would close down his business in June through the 1st of September and we'd go back to New York. So I was raised in the summers in New York City, and I'd spent a month in Brooklyn, a month in Manhattan, a month in New Jersey. And my dad would call up, and Bob Wilcox, who you may or may not have ever heard of, who was another big photographer, say, Bob, I'm going to New York for the summer. I've recommended all my clients call you. And they would call Bob Wilcox, and when my dad would come back, they'd come back to him. A little different time.
Where did you shoot that from?
What?
Where did you shoot that from?
The
Vantage point, that picture. Where do you think he was?
He was probably in just a Stearman or something like that. That's early enough that he would use his military. We bought a 172 Cessna, so he could have been in that. And he would literally put it on autopilot and lean out the door. So this was here until a few years ago, actually. This is at 32nd Street and, or maybe 24th Street in McDowell, right here, where the Circle K is. The blue door, I love that place. This is McDowell Road, right in front of you can see the car wash there. It's just east of the library. And I love the cars. The Red Dog Saloon, some of you may have hung out. Central Avenue. This is the airport. This is looking east from 24th Street and the old Mexican town that was at that part of town. The first McDonald's outside of California and the first one with golden arches. It was a new design. They built it here, and another brilliant move. We got to replace it with a Long John Silver's. Chicago took theirs, which was the first one, and it's a landmark in Chicago. We tore it down and put in the Long John Silver's. Thank you, Phoenix.
Where was this located?
What's that?
Where was this one located?
On the west side of McDowell, just south of Indian, or west side of Central, just south of Indian School. And there was no indoor dining. It was all outdoor dining. The Gilded Cage. The interior of the Gilded Cage. You notice how relaxed and comfortable the people look. Lifestyle photography was still in its infancy. Greyhound Park. I just throw this one in because I love the hairstyle, and this was shot in 1958. This is my dad shooting. It's not posy or anything.
That's probably actually a posing chair.
It is yeah, it's called a posing bench.
Yeah.
And we shot her on small film. This is for Hanny's, which was another giant account of my dad's. This is for Hanny, or this is for Prescott Sportswear. And this is how old I am. The girl on the right is Sandy Sanders, who was the hottie in my high school yearbook staff. Everybody had a crush on her. This is the Casablanca Inn, which is just north of Camelback, right down where Scottsdale Fashion Mall is. It had its own landing strip. It was the spot. You can see the dirt landing strip behind it.
Is that looking north?
That's looking north towards
See, where the
McDowell
beach-
Mountains, yeah.
where the beach is.
That's looking north towards McDowell Mountains. That's my dad shooting one of his favorite shots. He got a call from Life magazine to shoot a shot for Esso. And of course, it was a picture of an Indian showing tourists in a headdress. The Indians that never were in Arizona in their life, but showing at an Esso station on Indian School and Scottsdale Road. By the way, my first house that I was taken to was right where the produce section was at Bash's on the northwest corner of Scottsdale and Indian School. It's now red brick office building. I love this shot too. I don't know what this was for, but I just love the people. It's like, you can tell they were the hip people. They would be on Instagram now. Clubbing and vaping. That's Eleanor Roosevelt. There's a shot he did for the magazine. As seen every day in Phoenix. And I love the hairstyle of the woman. She looks like she's about to have fun in a convertible. I don't know any woman in the world that would drive in a convertible with her hair done like that. Miss America, Vonda K. Van Dyke, 1964. Landing at Sky Harbor Airport and getting her car. This is interesting. This is one of the Vanderbilts. He was an heir to the Vanderbilt. He got married in Scottsdale, called my dad to do his wedding. 10 days later, he jumped out of the 10th floor of the Fairmont in San Francisco, committed suicide. So, the wedding gone wrong. This is Lonesome George Goebel. I know I'm pulling names out of the hat here. A few. Does anybody know who he is?
Yep.
Few of you? Okay. And Buster Keaton. This is for John F. Long, Maryvale. This is Maryvale Bowling Alley. Kirk Douglas. Jane Mansfield, George Raft, and I forget the other one's a star too. I can't think of her name. Barry Goldwater with his daughter behind him. This passed for a home builder ad. So this is your typical housewife in her kitchen. This was for Hallcraft Homes, for those of you. I know I'm doing memory lane. Okay. This is downtown Central Phoenix. With clouds. We had monsoon. This is Central about, well, you can see it's just north or just south of First National Bank Building, which is now ASU Public Health, I think, or something like that. In the 60s, we got the bright idea, or the early 70s, we got the bright idea. We're going to build a monorail down Central Avenue. It only took us another 40 years. Sky Harbor, Terminal 2. This is one of the stories that Rick alluded to. This is Zsa Zsa Gabor, and she called up the photographer in Phoenix because she was at a theater here, and she wanted some pictures of her at the theater. So my dad went out and spent a couple hours taking pictures of Zsa Zsa, and he delivered the contacts, and she goes, "These are marvelous. I want 30 of them, 8 by 10. So my dad spent all night printing them, delivered them the next day before she leaves, and he goes, hands her a bill for $60 or $70, and she looks at it, she goes, "Zsa Zsa doesn't pay." And a famous story in our family. So my dad said, "And I don't take your pictures," and he grabbed them and left. This is Park Central. That's the racetrack that was there prior to Turf Paradise. And the vacant lot here, this is St. Joseph's, and this is Park Central. Creighton School of Medicine is right here now. So this is Central, this diagonal line. This is Thomas. Where the racetrack is, the horse track is, that's Osborne. This is like show and tell. Anybody know where this is? You can get up and look at it close if you want. It's the road running north-south is called Camelback. The road running east-west is called Scottsdale Road. So the lower left-hand corner is called Scottsdale Fashionable. 1947. Sky Harbor. They had diagonal runways.
Wasn't he only photographer at the time that had access to an aircraft? So he took these aerial photos of the aircraft?
I think pretty much.
Yeah.
He did tons. A lot of his shots early in the 40s, you can see the Stearman wings over the Grand Canyon and pictures like that. That's ASU Tempe, and that's the curve. And right in here, this is Grady Gamage. I'm sorry, right here is Grady Gamage.
Didn't recognize it.
What?
Didn't recognize it.
Anybody have any ideas about this one? Papago Park. The two rows in the lower left are Washington and Jefferson. That's split there. And the zoo wasn't there, nothing was there. The guy with the white hair is J.C. Penney. As I said, my dad shot everybody. It was amazing. Anybody who came to Phoenix, whoever visited here, for some reason, they would call my dad. This was a real big personality. The guy in the middle was Lou King, who had Lou King Rangers. And I was a Lou King Ranger because I had my $4 in the savings account at First Federal Savings. And I had a badge and a passport. This is now called a cell phone. General Electric was my dad's biggest account in the late 50s. And he learned a lesson. He did almost $100,000 worth of business with General Electric in 58. The next year they sold to Honeywell and went in-house. And my dad lost like 30 or 40% of his business because they went in-house. And my dad told me, he said, never let an account get too big. You know, that if it leaves you, it can destroy you. And that was one of his learning lessons. This is an airline shot, and the guy getting the mint or whatever it is the governor of Utah. This is the early 60s or 64, 65. This is the big flood in the Salt River. This was our house on McDowell on 7th Avenue. And basically, there's a full basement under that house. And my dad's Woody, a cool car. A black baseball team of some local union back in the late 40s, like 48. Completely segregated. Midget auto racing. This is a place called the Sanctuary Resort. At the time, it was called the Paradise Valley Racket Club. My dad did all their work for years. And it's just priceless. The bathing suits, the hairstyles. I mean, this is
all those ladies with their white legs and modesty when you photograph.
They were. My dad had a way with women. What can I say? This is 15th Avenue and Van Buren, looking northeast. 47. My florist, which is still around. A few things they haven't torn down. My dad's studio. This is Biltmore with no homes in it yet. Casablanca Inn. This was an advertising shot. My dad was very proud of this. It was like the first time he had really shot sort of lifestyle kind of thing for APS. And color. And how many of you knew that L. Ron Hubbard lived in Phoenix in the beginning? He had a place on 44th just north of Camelback. And they bugged me for like 3 years to get the negatives. I said, I'll make duplicates for it. They said, no, we have to have the originals. We'll make duplicates. And I finally, they scared me. I finally said, I'll send you all the originals. And they did send me duplicate negatives. That's L. Ron Hubbard. They're a little scary kind of people. That's the Arizona Biltmore looking towards Camelback. This was later became Luigi's at 3rd Street in McDowell. It was a great restaurant. It was built in-house. I love this shot just because of the platinum hair. It was the Jane Mansfield era, and she's Miss Somebody. And she's giving a Salesman of the Year award to some guy out in the street.
Nice location for that.
That's his name. This is Miss Phoenix, 1955. This is actually my bedroom, and I'm thrilled I found this because I didn't know my dad used it as a background. And I made all those model planes, and that was my Buntline special, the Wyatt Earp or Doc Holliday Buntline special on the wall. I don't know who the kid is, but he's my age. He's still alive. This was in front of our house. This was for SRP. And I don't know who these kids are, but they're 70 now. This was an ad for Hanny's, and they propped her up, and somehow this got pasted into an ad. This shot's interesting. This is the swim team, the swim competition at Arizona Phoenix Paradise Valley Racket Club. And the guy third from the left was almost my brother-in-law, and I didn't realize it. I posted this picture, and I dated his sister for a year and a half. And when I posted this picture, they go, "That's my picture, Barney Rouse." Anybody remember Barney Rouse? He's still around. So there's the Racket Club. That's what the pool looked like before. They probably right about where the sanctuary is now. making tortillas for Rosita's Tortillas. High fashion for a home builder. As I call it, Barbizon pose number 87. This is David Murdoch again. That's a birthday cake for the construction of his building. It's leaning a little bit. And the warehouse, I put some of these pictures in because they're just a time and space. The cleaning crew at the Ramada Inn on Van Buren. It's a time warp. This is channel 3. These are what the bartender and the waitresses at the Ramada Inn at 40th Street look like. Buster Keaton in front of a brand new John F. Long home. At the bowling alley. I love this show. This is a hair competition, a cosmetic competition. And boy, if that's what wins an award in hair, we're all in trouble. Anybody know who this guy is? He is the father of probably the most famous Arizonan ever. He invented the computer at General Electric. His name was Aaron Spielberg. So my dad did basic portraits for General Electric, and I found this. I went, Aaron Spielberg? That could be Steven Spielberg's father. So I went on the internet and I looked it up, and it's like, his dad was Aaron Spielberg. Nice little story about how he's one of the founders of building computers. So he had no idea that he would be the poor member of the family. The islands. An ad for Hanny's. Just the way every couple packs. This was going to be cut out for Hanny's too. I'm not sure what. I'm sorry, this was for Ice Capades or Ski Capades. And if you want to be, you know, a little racist and a little, you know, Chinese laundromat, I mean, this is for Hanny's. Like, get your shirts cleaned by a Chinaman.
What's in his hand? What's the guy?
That's his braid, ponytail. You probably wouldn't see this ad today. Nor this ad, two guys milking a cow, yoo-hoo and yoo-hoo. This is 56th Street and Indian School looking northwest towards Squaw Peak or High Shore. To this day, I would get political. Why don't they call it Tillman or Goldwater Peak? I never understood why they called it High Shore Peak. Sorry, that's my political stance. This is the old Vista movie theater at Central and Monroe, looking north. There was a coffee shop there. There's Governor Paul Fannin and two special, I think they were the boxcar derby kids. I remember. Again, Ben-Hur. This is Glendale, for those of you who know Glendale. And the bank, the Valley Bank at Glendale, the tellers. That's my dad with all of his equipment. That's the same shot that everybody does now with their camera right here. This is like, pull every piece of equipment you have, stand in the middle of it. And that floor that he's on, when I got out of college and I was aimless and shiftless and didn't know it, he offered me $500 a month. And one of my jobs was I got a bucket and a brush, and every single day I got my hands and knees with Ajax and scrubbed all the footprints off that floor. I have nightmares about that floor. I also mixed chemicals before there were such things as pre-mixed chemicals. You would take literally grains of sand and chemicals and bromides and things and put it in a scale and weigh it, and then mix it into water and then take the next. And I mixed chemicals. I got Hardner poisoning one day, and I was sick for 3 days from being over the fumes too long. I developed all the Z4 film. I did all the fun stuff. I made contacts, sheets, and so it wasn't a great start. That's my dad shooting an ad for SRP, hanging light bulbs. I have no idea why. There's Carl Hayden at that ad right there with JFK. And again, these are the costumes for Bill Johnson's Big Apple, the waitresses and the waiters. And of course, the Palms Theater, the Indian Drive-In. Another ad for outdoor living for SRP. Castle Hot Springs, my dad shot that in 1968. And I shot it again when they opened 2 years ago. These were the Chinese generals that are now generals who were trained by our Air Force to be fighter pilots. And so they all ended up, those that lived through World War II became big mucky mucks. And they were trained by the Americans in the Communist Chinese Party in Mao Zedong. Downtown street scene. Legend City. Another non-sexist ad. This is Castle Hot Springs, a wonderful place to get a chance. A little pricey, but the Orpheum Theater, which I, as a kid, only knew as the Paramount. I love this shot. If I do a book, this will be the cover. This guy's dressed up in a diaper, says 1947 New Year's Eve. Just a time frame. Camelback Inn, or Camelback Mountain, sorry, when you could buy land. I asked my dad once, I said, why did you buy land at Camelback Mountain? He said, there weren't any roads out to it, so why would you buy land? Annie's is still there. Another gorgeous shot for Hallcraft Homes. One of the things I did when I was learning photography, my dad had two 500-watt floods. And he would shoot a room, and I put a flood here and a flood there, and he'd stand in the middle with a speed graphic on a tripod. And then as soon as we're done that room, I'd run to the next room, put a flood here and a flood there. So I learned two lights at a time, one equal, one on the side. So it's like the worst lighting in the world that I had to overcome. No hard shadows here. Another little sexist ad of John F. Long with his arms around, I think that's Ava Gardner. I'm not sure. I know it's one of them. The girl with the legs on the B-52. Was that Ava Gardner? What?
Lady Grable.
She was blonde.
And she's one of those real famous. I'll have to look it up again. But like, yeah, I'm going to put an apron on this movie store. And another beautiful room shot. A Chevron campaign. Fashion shoots with a cone tiki. Like, I'm going to have my drink in the hand staring at this wood. This is the cone tiki interior. And she won this fabulous 17-inch black and white TV. So those are some of the shots. So anyway, any questions on any of this? I know I ran through a lot of stuff. Refocus or reposition.
Are these the kind of photos that'll be in the book?
Yeah.
Oh,
I gave Arizona Highways 1,500 images. I scanned over 5 months. I scanned 1,500 images. There's 126 there.
yeah,
They're going to pick 150.
yeah.
And I don't know which ones they're going to pick. And I always say I give Arizona Highways. I love Arizona Highways. They're my favorite account, even though they don't pay very much. So it's still my favorite account. And I love all the people there, Jeff Kidd and Robert Steve. But I always say I give them lots of variations, so they have a lot of stuff to reject.
Right.
They never pick what I think is the best shot.
Yeah.
And I find that with clients all the time. I don't know. You go, this is great. It's my portfolio. I go, really? You like that? I mean, I was shooting for LGE yesterday, which is the building company. And everybody shot me, which one do you like best? I go, it doesn't make any difference which one I like best. Because you're never going to pick it. I had a client, she was a motivational speaker, I won't give her name, and she came in every 10 years for like 30 years. And the first time I shot her, she loved it. The second time she goes, these don't look as good of me as the last time. I go, well, you were 30 last time, now you're 40. You know? And then the third time she said, will you help me pick? And she had her entourage. She was real big time. She had her entourage for 6 people. I go, I'm not going to help you pick, but you know, you're not going to like the ones I pick anyway. And she bugged me for his all-day shoot. We're shooting her in every, you know, talking, gesturing, so she has ads for everything. And I finally, like towards 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I said, okay, let me go. I go through for like 20 minutes. I pick 5. I go. She goes, which ones did you pick? I go, I said, these 5. And she goes, and she's like, and you can tell there's no joy. She turns around, she goes, really? And I go, that's why I don't pick. I said, and there's a reason for that. It's one of my little trade secrets that I'll give to you, is that people don't know the way they look. Everybody's asymmetrical. Everybody has a round eye and a squinty eye. Everybody has a longer side of the mouth and a shorter side, and a flatter side of the face and a rounder side. And how do you see yourself? In a mirror? What is a mirror?
Reverses.
Reversed. So your round eye is on the wrong side when you see it. It's like listening to yourself in a videotape. And so people hate. And I've actually had clients that hated all the pictures, so I went on my computer and reversed them. And go, oh, these are much better. That's why everybody likes Instagram, because it shoots you backwards. They were genius. I don't have any knowledge of this, but I don't think they did that by accident. I think they actually psychologically thought of it and said, we're going to do reverse shot of everybody on Instagram. And people love their pictures on Instagram. And they hate their pictures when you shoot them the right way. So that's one of the things I do on portraits. So no questions at all. I know this was boring. Buy the book. You know, we never did Wallace and Ladmo. There's a few, and one of the things I wanted to do, I wanted to shoot Barry Goldwater. My dad shot him a dozen times, and I never got to meet him. And I was literally at the point going, I'm just going to go knock on his door and say, can I take pictures of you? I mean, I shot Sandra Day O'Connor when she was running for city council. And it's her and her husband watching her like 4-year-old jump on a trampoline at their house. And I mean, they're great pictures. But I never got to shoot Barry Goldwater as well. I mean, I did campaigns for like John Rhodes, and I got in his plane and flew around with him for a week, and all of his little stops in Prescott, Chino, but Barry Goldwater eluded me. It's one of the non-bucket lists I'll ever have. Shot John McCain, shot Cindy McCain. John McCain was, I liked John McCain at the time. John McCain came in, I was shooting Cindy McCain for Women's Day, and we're in the house, and I'm shooting her with her Springer Spaniels, and John comes home, and as a friend of mine said, who works for Cindy, said, when John walked in, all the air went out of the room. And it was like all the smiles stopped, and I said, John, can I take pictures of you with Cindy? He said, sure. He said, you know, so that's my only, Cindy was wonderful. She was a delight. But John was just a sort of stickman. I would do some stuff stories about myself. The worst person I've ever shot, any guesses? I've shot 400 or 500 celebrities. Dick Clark.
Really?
Asshole. I don't care if he's dead, he's an asshole. And I have a friend, an assistant named Tim Pinnell, who's a very well-known shooter, national shooter. And he actually went to LA with me when we shot him. I said, tell me, he said, I remember shooting Dick Clark. I said, tell me, is my memory of him the same? He said, asshole. I said, thank you. At least I didn't have a fake memory of the situation. As you know, you get a little older, and what you remember, what other people remember is always the same. So, but I shot Loretta Swit for, I did the first national media, first infomercials, and we shot celebrities for 2-minute infomercials. The group called National Media Group out of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and they invented the infomercial, the short one. And we had Loretta Swit one day. I'd go to LA and shoot 5 celebrities in a week, and then come back 2 months later and shoot 5 more. And they were always, it was a great account for about 10 years. And Loretta Swit came in, And she was doing a Broadway play, and we're shooting her on Sunday because she did Saturday night, and then they had a stand-in for her on Sunday. So she flew to LA. We shot her. We were going to shoot her Sunday afternoon. She was going to fly back on the red eye to New York. And she got off the plane, and the driver that they had dropped her suitcase on her toe and tore off the nail. So I get to the location, which is a house we've rented, and she's there, and I go, why is her foot in a bucket of ice? They said she tore off her nail. We've got a doctor coming to like stitch it up.
Yeah.
But she's like, so I've got pictures of her with a bucket here, what you can't see, and she's like, this real trooper, could barely walk. But, I mean, I shot Charles Barkley, and he was shooting free throws we were in an all-day shoot, and we were shooting three-pointers all day, and he's missed every one of them. He says, I bet you $100 I hit the next one. And of course, I was making a lot of money, so I couldn't for the shoot, so I couldn't say no because I'd be a weenie. And so I said, okay, and he's $100 out the window. Set me up all day long.
That's funny.
Oh, tell us about the time when you went from moving the lights for your dad to taking photographs for him.
Well, my story is, unlike Rick had a passion for photography from what age? 12. My first bedroom, which was at 10th Avenue and Van Buren, my parents rented the garage, which had been set up as a one-bedroom with a kitchen in World War II when she was first out there in 1945. So my dad would literally, that was the bedroom's seconded as a darkroom. He'd hang military blankets on the window, and while my mom was cleaning dishes, or as soon as it got dark, he'd go in and print and develop film in the bedroom. My crib was also in the bedroom. So I actually slept by a safe light, stuck deck towel from the time I was months old. So I was raised in the business. At 4 years old, I would sit at my dad's big table, and I'd rock the deck towel tray with the prints in it. That was my job. I just couldn't do this, you know. And I got paid, as I said, I think in the article, someday this will all be yours. And I realized everybody in our family was shorter than 90, 92 years old, and I'd be this age before any of it was mine. So that's when I went out on my own. But I was a mediocre athlete, so in high school I decided to go on annual staff because that's where all the pretty girls were. And I took Richard Zimmerman at West High School was my photo teacher, and he taught me more about photography than I can ever thank him for. He was really a solid teacher, and but there were girls in there that tried to molest you all day long, which I was not smart enough to take advantage of. And Linda Day George was our annual staff editor. She became an actress, Mission Impossible, things like that. And then all the girls were cheerleaders in high school. Our teacher, Mr. Zimmer, was a little bit of a lech, but we liked him. And so I got out of high school and I said, I definitely don't want to be a photographer because I had worked every day after school and every summer in my dad's business from the time I was 10. And I hated it. I mean, I wasn't doing the great stuff. And I got out of college and I had a girlfriend that I looked like I was going to marry. My dad said, do you want to come to work for me? Because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I said, I don't know. He said, I'll give you $500 a month, which I thought was a lot of money. And I said, okay. And I went to work for him that was 68. I got out of the Coast Guard Reserve September 28th, 1968. And I went to work October 1st, 1968 for my dad for $500 a month. And my job was literally anything that the staff, which was about 10 people, didn't want to do. Garbage, cleaning, washing the floors, taking the holders. These holders had Ansco film, these holders had Plus X film, mixing the chemicals, developing film, making contact sheets, numbering, spotting. Spotting was pre-Photoshop. Get rid of all the dirt spots when I had eyes. And I hated it. I mean, my first wife called me Ganello. Ganello stood for Great North American Loafing Oaf. And because I would show up to work at 8:38 and I'd be leaning towards the door at 4:59. I was that employee. And I finally, after quitting 3 times to get a raise, I'd be there on a Saturday with boxes filled in my office. My dad said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm quitting." So why? Because I can't get a raise. He goes, "What do you need?" I said, $100. I'm your son. Okay, $100. So I wasn't worth it. And so somewhere in the early to mid 70s, all the photographers were out of the building. My dad had like 5 or 6 photographers. They were all out of the building doing something. And we got a last minute call, and I remember this the day I died, from the Copper Institute of America. And they were holding a big show or convention at the Biltmore. And they needed a photographer. And I showed up there, and they had a 1974 Lincoln Continental Mark IV convertible covered with copper metal plate paint. And even better, they had a great looking model that they wanted shot in front of it. And we shot it at the Wrigley Mansion. And I went, wow, this could be cool. I could do this. And that changed my entire attitude. And girls, you know, and cars. And so that's when I changed and I started actually applying myself. I'm not a natural talent. Rick's pretty much a natural talent. I'm a worker. Rick was given both gifts. He's a natural talent and a worker. I don't call myself an artist. I call myself a craftsman. I work under other people's parameters. And to me, an artist works under his own parameters. So when you guys go out and shoot for yourself, you're an artist. If you get a client that says, I need a vertical, and I need the sun over here, I need space up here, I need a car here, I need this here, you're no longer an artist, you're a craftsman. You try to do it as well as you can, but the reality is you're working under other people's parameters. So that's my argument, and I get in that argument all the time, because I hear photographers who shoot, this is art, and I go, no, it's creative, it's nice, but it's not art. And you'll never convince me that it is art. So it's good craftsmanship, and I'm a good craftsman. Rick, he's even leaning towards the art world now as his craftsmanship period ends, and he's becoming more of an artist. Would you say that's right?
I would say basically to answer your question, focus is overrated. So that's the department I'm in.
And what I tell students, if you can't make it good, make it big. And if you can't make it arty, make it black and white. So, I mean, people say to me, how do you, I had a girl call me and said, how do I do a great headshot, a great portrait? I said, find somebody that's really beautiful or somebody that's really interesting, like Christopher Walken. I can do a shot of this young man here and make it the most beautiful shot in the world, and it isn't worth 2 pennies. But if I have Christopher Walken there or Jack Nicholson there, all of a sudden I'm an artist. With the exact same pose, the exact same lighting. So a lot of it's marketing and hype, and that's just, you know,
Reality.
that's the reality of it. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, Rick and I have had incredible careers. I mean, I look at myself as like, I've known 3 people in my life that were given what I call the gift. My sister was given the gift. She never used it. She could walk out with 15, take a picture. How did you do that? You know, no skills, no nothing. She was just given. Steve Thompson, to me, was given the gift. You know, then there are people like Rick Rusi, who outran us all, who wasn't given the gift, but he was just given the ethic and the work attitude and the ability to learn. I have the ability to learn. Rick has the ability to learn. We don't screw it up. My pictures, to this day, my pictures from 2 months ago, I don't like that much. I like the pictures I did today, and tomorrow I'll like them better. Because I think I'm getting better and I'm learning more. And it all sort of coalesced. There was a moment at Sanctuary I shoot with a guy named Jack Rusnecki. He's a well-known shooter out of New York. He was president of the Professional Photographers of America at one point. We shared a New York rep together. That's how we knew each other. And we shoot once or twice a year. We go somewhere, Mexico, Buffalo, Arizona, somewhere, and we just shoot. We used to shoot girls. Now we shoot rocks and bottles and things like cracks in the wall and trash, and we have a great time. But I was shooting. We were in the Valley Ho. It was 117, not the Valley Ho, in the Sanctuary, where it was 117 degrees that day, and they put us in a sauna room to shoot. I said, can we borrow sauna? Because we wanted the table. We had this great looking model. And it had like a frosted glass door like that entered into the thing. And no other lights. And Jack said, let's shoot into the door. I said, you can't do that. That light, this is like 2003. This is my epiphany moment. I said, it's backlighting, you know, we won't get any details. And he takes his camera out and he shoots it. He shoots for the skin tone. I look at it, everything's blown out. There's this great halation and the most beautiful skin you've ever seen on somebody. I went, oh my God, changed the entire way I shot. I started shooting into light, restaurants, everywhere I go now. I look for two things. When I'm shooting, I look, people say, what do you look for? I said, first I look for where my source of light is. So this is my source of light in this room. And a little bit from up here. And then I look for my distance. How much distance do I have? And what's in the background? Can I use that source of light? And if I can't, then I shoot into it and blow it out. And that's, you know, and that's changed the entire way I shoot. My stuff has feeling now. Before it was just clean, polished work, you know, and it's like people liked it, but it was. So now, I mean, I keep threatening to shoot jobs on my cell phone. That the 12 is an amazing instrument. Yeah.
So do you put your own photography you purchase?
No. I have one thing hanging in my house of mine that I'm embarrassed about. So I collect, I've got a world-class collection. I've got Bert Stern's last Maryland shoot. I've got Stravinsky at the piano. I made friends, by being in a group like this, I made friends with Arnold Newman. And he liked me, because I liked him with one. His sons are all chemists and geniuses. And as he said to me, I said, where's your collection going to? He said, oh my God, my kid, in his New York Jewish accent, said, my kids are fighting over it as soon as I die, you know. And he had like 400 of every print from Moonrise. In his bathroom above the light switch, he had Moonrise over Hernandez. And it's like to my friend Arnold from Ansel, you know, yeah. Man Ray. I mean, every picture you've ever seen in a book, he had hanging floor to ceiling in a 3,000 square foot Beaux Arts apartment. I was lucky enough to know him for a couple years before he passed. One of the great memories of my life. And I'll tell you an Arnold Newman story. Everybody know who Arnold Newman is? Mm-hmm. We're there. My wife and I are there, and we went by the studio, and then he said, "Come on over. We'll have hors d'oeuvres at the house." And so we're having hors d'oeuvres at the house. Let's go to dinner. I know a great little Japanese place on Broadway, West Broadway. Great. I don't even like Japanese, but Arnold asked, I'll eat sushi. You know? And so we go there, and it's a Kyoto Bowl. Basically, it's Formica tabletops, fluorescent lights, cement floors, linoleum floors, just sort of a trashy, you know. And so there's four of us eating, my wife and I, and Arnold and his wife. And the bill comes, and this is 2004 or 5. The bill comes, and I say, and the bill shows up, and I grab the bill and goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm paying for this, Arnold." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "You're not big enough or strong enough, and you're too old to fight me for this. I'm paying for it." So he goes, okay. And so I'm paying for the bill. I put out my credit card. It's like $47 for 4 people in New York. I mean, you can't eat anywhere in the world for that. And I put out the bill, and I see him reach into his wallet, and he's pointing something out. And I look at him, and I go, "What are you doing?" He said, "If you're going to pay for the bill, use this." And he gives me a coupon for 15% off. That's my favorite Arnold Newman story. So no matter, and he had a collection in his living room that was worth maybe $50 to $100 million. I mean, he had every artist he traded with artists. He told me the story of working with Jackson Pollock early on, and Jackson Pollock is like a friend of his. Jackson comes in, "Arnold, I'm doing my first show. I need a portrait. Will you do a portrait of me for my first show?" Arnold said, "Sure, $50 or whatever it was." And so Arnold Jackson does the show. Jackson comes by and says, Arnold calls and says, "I need the money, Jackson." And Jackson said, "I don't have the money. The show went bad." He said, "I really need the money. I got kids to feed." And Jackson said, "Can I pay you like $2 a week?" He said, "Whatever. I need the money." The next week, Jackson shows up at his store with a painting. He said, "Can I trade you the $50 for the painting?" And Arnold said, Jackson, I need the money. So Jackson finally came up with the money after several months. Arnold told me, he said, I follow that painting from the day I turned it down. This is 2001 or 2. He said, last time it sold for $9 million. That's the worst decision I've ever made in my life, but I needed the money. So we don't always make smart decisions. Question? We do have a museum here. I don't know, are we doing it?
I don't know what.
Have I wasted enough?
You want to show them the 40 minutes?
Okay, well, I mean, I can tell stories all day long, but
You want to show them the safe for all?
Yeah. yeah, we have two things that are maybe of some historical significance here. I have, my dad when he built this building, he put in a vault, an actual bank door that I don't have the combination to. And all of his negatives are there. And of course, he never shot digitally. I shot digitally. I love digital. I don't understand. I mean, there's a whole clan of young people who like records and vinyls. They, oh, they're so excited. I'm developing film. I go, you realize I used to shoot Dillards every day of my life. And I'd shoot 40 to 60 rolls of black and white film. I'd be in a dark room for 3 hours in the dark with Dektol and D76. And I said, I never want to spend another minute in a dark room. I've got years of my life developing film. I was a world-class printer. It's the one thing I was good at. I was really a world-class printer. I spent 3 years working for my dad as his official printer. All I did is I'd walk in that dark room at 8 o'clock to 8:30 in the morning. I'd come out at 5 and I'd print all day long. Walking trays, 100 for W.R. Scholl's exteriors of his 100 8x10 prints. 1, 2, 3, rock. Short stuff, fix, wash. You know, I don't understand. They get so excited about shooting film and stuff. But I guess if you only have to develop 3 rolls a month, it's not that bad. So I've shot, my cameras, I burn out backs on my cameras. Rick doesn't shoot as much as me because his stuff stands still.
That stuff doesn't move.
But I shoot 400,000 images every couple of years. I shoot 250 to 300,000 images a year. I burn through backs and cameras. I'm not nostalgic about my cameras. And, you know, I don't treat them well. I throw them on the ground. They get dirt. They're tools, so I don't really worry about it. They're there to make me money. But I've had this great career, just like my dad. My dad was more of a businessman. I'm terrible business. The only piece of business advice I ever learned that I did was I had 9 people working for me at one point because my dad grew big. He had like 80 people working for him. And I thought that's the way you're successful. And about mid-90s, I had 9 people working for me. And all I was doing was I wasn't shooting anymore. I was writing paychecks and listening to complaints. So as people quit or I fired them, I didn't replace them. So I grew to 1, from 9 to 1. It's the best decision I ever made in my life. Since my studio manager left, what was that, 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
I think it's longer than that.
Maybe it's longer than that. If I can't do it, it doesn't get done. That's my business. I mean, and my business acumen is if you have more money coming in than you have going out, you're a success. I don't do percentages. I don't, you know, people, and I've done fairly well doing that. So I think Rick's the same way. You're a little bit more of a numbers cruncher than me, but yeah. But I mean, I just like it. My bank account doesn't go down. My checking account doesn't go down. I'm doing okay. Anyway.
Oh, did your dad start Photomark and Colormark too?
So I'll tell that story because we have time. We were at 741, this building, 741 East McDowell. It's now an audio sound place. And my dad had, amongst other accounts, U-Haul. And I used to shoot like the back of the truck with a family loading equipment in it, 4x5 color negative. And they wanted 40x60 prints for their stores. And nobody in Arizona made 40x60. The color was just coming in. This is the late 60s, early 70s. Color was just coming in. And some people made 8x10s or 11x14s, maybe 60, but nobody could make a 40x60. My dad said you had to go send it to LA or Chicago or New York, but those 2 places. And he had a friend named from Kaufman and Fabry. I don't remember the name of the guy, but the company was called Kaufman and Fabry out of Chicago. And they could do 40x60s. My dad called him and said, they were friends. And he said, we want to put in a 40 by 60 color printing machine in our studio. How do we do it? And the guy said, I'll send you the plans. We did one here. And the guy sent my dad the plans, and it took like 2 months, and we had to build 40 by 60 tanks, this wide, out of wood, fiberglass them so they'd hold chemicals, and they had people doing it. And then overhead rail system with electronics that would dip the, and we took an entire room, probably a little bit bigger than my dressing room, and we put in 40 by 60 with the rail system and as much mechanical stuff as we had. And that we made color prints. We had a guy named Art Christensen who became a real top-end shooter in town. And he was from Pittsburgh. My dad hired him, and he could color print. So he started printing color prints, 40 by 60s. Other photographers found out about it and said, hey, I've got an account that needs a 40 by 60 or 20 by 30. Can you print it? So all of a sudden, Art stopped shooting, and all he was doing is printing. And he said, my dad got the idea. My dad was savvy that way. He said, this town could use a real color lab. So we opened up Color Mark there, and then we bought the building at 16th Street in Cal, and we put in a color lab there with a 40 by 60, and it became a hit. And Kodak came out at some point in the late 60s, early 70s with a film called Vericolor, which was a real good color negative film. But they didn't want to sell the film through camera stores. They wanted to sell it through photo labs. So they went to my dad and said, if you'll put in this glass refrigerator, we'll supply you with film and you can buy the machine and you'll be the only person in Phoenix processing Vericolor. My dad said, sure. So we did that. So all of a sudden we were selling film from behind the front desk, then camera straps, cable releases, a couple of camera bags and a few chunky things like that. And that place just exploded. And my dad, in the meantime, we'd grown out of 741. We built this building. Then he said, I'm going to build a building next door of 9,000 square feet and put the color lab in there. And basically, the color lab went maybe 20 feet back. There wasn't out of a 9,000 foot building. And then we started putting more and more stuff in. We put kiosks in with straps and things like that. And over about 2 or 3 years, the building just totally filled up. The wall kept moving back. And then Dad said, we can put in a photo supply house. And he built the next building, Photomark. And that building was doing 10 million in sales a year. We were the 7th largest Polaroid dealer in the country. We had an industrial department selling to the state, everything else. And we sold everything. We sold Hasselblads, we sold Mamiya's, we sold Profoto.
Did you have 5 locations at one point?
We had 5 locations, yeah. We had one in Tempe. You know where Chuck Box is in Tempe? You know the tattoo parlor behind it? That was a Photomark.
Oh.
There was one in West Valley Mall. There was one in North Phoenix. There was one on East Camelback. There was Bob's camera that became a Photomark at 40th Street in Camelback, for Indian School, I guess. And it was huge. And he always said, why don't you go into retail? I said, because I love my life and I don't want to do what you do. You know? And so he had a son, another son called Paul Taylor, who's 3 days older than me, who became his general manager and went to lunch every day with my dad. And he basically made the family rich. He kept my dad in the business. And then about 2005, this huckster from Boston came in and said, I put together $20 million. I want to buy your industrial division. And he was going to buy all in second-tier cities, all their industrial divisions, put it together into a big industrial division, and then sell it off. And he got $20 million from a bank in Boston. And my dad said, Paul Taylor said, we're not going to sell one division of our business. So if you buy Colormark, Photomark, and the industrial division, and the portrait division, we'll sell it to you. And the guy said, he showed the numbers and it was making money. He said, okay, I'll do it. And so he wrote my dad a big fat check, cash, and I had 3% of the business, and I got a big fat check. And he sold it, and he moved out. 2 years later, digital took off. It'd been there for 10 years, but it took off, and nobody wanted film anymore. Nobody wanted film cameras. And so at the end of his life, he moved out of the photo supply business like 2 years before it died. had like 80 people working for him. It was a monster. That I never wanted any part of it. But it was probably, and basically, if you look at it, Rick Gale is off the family tree. He's a distant cousin. But my dad hired most of the great photographers that moved to Phoenix. And he brought them in from Doug Jones, he brought him from Salt Lake City. Art Christensen, he brought in from Pittsburgh. Les Benton, he brought in from LA. And all these guys, like my dad hired Doug Jones. I picked him up at the airport. Doug worked for my dad, then went out on his own and started his own business, and he hired Rick. And he hired Dave Siegel. So Rick is off the family tree, one branch off, and all the assistants that he's hired are off, I consider off the family tree. So most of the young photographers, except for the very brand new ones, are off my dad's lineage of, he sort of started it. He was the first really big photographer who had assistants and photographers who went out on their own and became successful on their own right and stars in their own right. So I look at your assistants as
Hail to Bob Markow.
Yes.
it's a nice little thought. I mean, it doesn't mean much and nobody really gives a shit, but you know, for me, it's sort of where, you know, I look at it. So my dad was a great guy. I miss him. He had lots of Bobisms, and you know, I mean, he used to say things to me. He said, you know, start swimming to shore. He said, nobody gets anywhere treading water. And I always loved that one because that's what I was doing. I was treading water. You have to head in a direction. And, you know, it doesn't make any difference how far out to sea you are. If you just tread water, you're just going to drown. It's maybe my favorite Bobism. And the other one he said to me when I was 14, he said, the hardest thing in photography is to know the difference between good and better. And that's a hard one. If you have two pictures, you lay them side by side, you can see, oh, this one's better. But if you only have one picture, what's this picture going to look like? And what's your ability to make this picture look better than this one? So understanding what's missing in this picture is one of the really key things. And would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I remember making prints, black and white prints, you'd be in the dark room, you'd be playing around and trying some things, you're working with one negative, and then you'd have 8 or 9 prints that you look at, and you lay them all out and start picking the best. And you would come down to what you think are the best two. And then you would kind of, well, I don't know which one's which. Okay, so you would give those 2 prints to a colleague, and you would close your eyes and he would put them in whatever order. Okay, then he would say, which one do you like? And then you would point to the one you like. Then he would do something, switch them, and then you would point to the other one that you thought was the best, which gets to the point where they're both good. So sometimes you really start tweaking things because that's kind of what the nature of what we do is. What can I do here? What can I bring up this highlighter, black and dark in the shadow? You get to a point where you can't see the difference between good and better. So that was one thing I remember very much about making black and white prints.
It really is that. I mean, all the time, you know, you turn around and you look at something and you go, oh God, I wish I'd done that. So, and it's, I mean, I want to do a t-shirt with sayings that, famous sayings that I like Dick Avedon said, I don't like to shoot in any air I can't taste, which I think is one of the great lines in the world. And Jay Maisel said, if you don't like what you're shooting in front of you, turn around. You know, and Arnold Newman said 90% of becoming a great photographer is getting the job. 2% is talent and 8% is moving furniture. So, you know, so I mean, there's all these great lines that I live by. I mean, actually, I've learned. I go to art museums and I go to places and I look for images, like the picture of Jenna Jameson out there, the porn star. I saw that picture in a painting in the National Portrait Gallery in London as a picture of a Victorian model sitting in the chair with her legs wrapped around an old wicker chair and an artist in a cloth painting her. I just changed it to be a modern chair, modern clothes, and a videographer. And instead of having an old Victorian window, I had a movie set behind it. So a lot of what you do is just stealing ideas and then tweaking them and making them your own. And I'm constantly, every time I go in a museum, I take my cell phone, I'm like, oh, I'll use this painting somewhere. I'll use this light. I'll use this composition. So I'm constantly doing that, and it's just a way to get better.
Well, that kind of stuff is what makes photography or any creative thing exciting. I mean, the one thing that I and Paul and anybody else that does this apart is that you're always looking for that next moment of discovery and joy that hits you right in your solar plexus. And when you're looking at a painting or a photograph that reminds you of something, or you see a work that someone's done, and you look at it and go, that reminds me of something that Robert Frank did, looks just like it. So that's the excitement, not just the creating that you do from within, but how you see yourself connected to everybody else that came before you. That's why I think history is so important. Knowing who came before you. Whether
George
it was
Eastman.
What's that?
Like George Eastman.
Yeah, George Eastman. Yeah. And yeah, Paul did a sort of a little test every time he has a group of students come in. He, I guess, puts a picture up.
Well, I've got a picture in the museum, George Eastman.
And no one knows who the guy is.
I'd say it's a little bit like being a Christian and not knowing who Jesus is. It's like, really? You don't know? You're 27 and you're a photographer, you have no idea who George Eastman is? No, who is it? You know, so, yeah, it's may become one of my new goals is to inform this next generation of who George Eastman is. As lame as that sounds, it pisses me off that they don't know who he is. It's like, I'm sorry. Like I knew who Stieglitz was, and he was never alive when I was alive. You know, so you're in the business. You know, learn your history. So everybody here knows who George Eastman is. Is there anybody who doesn't?
They're not going to say so.
So anyway, I'm going to take you up front, and you can ask me any questions you want. I'll show you the vault, and then the museum's here, and maybe half of you go to the museum because it's a small museum, and then I'll take the other half up front because it's a small cave up there. And Rick knows all that stuff. I'm willing to answer any questions. I don't know if this is informative as you wanted it to be, but
Oh, it's been great.
Yeah. Okay.
half of you come up front with me, and half of you, the museum, see that table with the lights on it?
Yep.
If you go right around it, make a right, as you hit the table, and there's a door there, and there's a museum in there with about 400 or 500 cameras, and you can date yourself by which one you used when you were a kid.
Thank you very
And
much.
I guess I could take some, just let them peer into the cave of history.
If you want to open, you can go to the cave.
Yeah.
So I'll
Whoever wants to
Okay.
go to the cave, you don't see no money.
Now,
I was wondering.
I think I'm going to try and take them back to the cave.
oh, you're gonna take them back?
Yeah.
Oh my God. My favorite place to be. I like to go there, and I would have the, I think it was the South Side steak with mushrooms, or I think it was a top steak with mushrooms.
Okay, we're going to go back to the vault where the negatives are stored, and you can join along if you want, or consider this the conclusion of the event. But we're going to also go to the camera museum. So if you're interested in that, you can stick around, or if
I'll
not,
stick around.
we'll see you. And if you have questions, unmute yourself, and there's a chance I might be able to hear your question and give it over to Paul. So thank you. I'm going to take you over to the.
Thanks, Richard.
Yep. Oh, start. Okay.
We lost your connection, I think.
group of negatives had a job number and a description so that they could make prints when clients called in with new orders.
So this is the work of about 50 years, 40 years? Or-
Yeah. And I think some of the negatives have already been taken to the Historical Society, and they're going to come up and get the rest of them. I'm not sure when. But, you know, it goes back to 1945. And
Wow. Not climate controlled though.
no, it's not. I don't know if anybody thought about that back.
Yeah.
But nowadays, this would all be in your iMac in a folder somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, so each one of these would have whatever negatives were shot for the job. So it's June 30th, 1981. Photographer was Paul. That's the job number. The client, I guess, was an agency. And this is the description of the client that the agency had. And then I guess it, you know, you put whatever the order was on here, and the negatives were all in these glassine envelopes. I'm putting it out of order, so hopefully I don't screw up the whole system.
Oh no, there it goes. They're going to be looking for that.
Yeah, I tell you, that's a big job.
Applied secretarial practice.
Well, I guess there's always been organizations that would sort of be like a very low line version of the Emmys. So I guess there was an art directors club here, and I guess Bob got the certificate for something.
Wow.
Negatives have been in here for a long time, and they've held up, so it really should be here.
Yeah.
Because he can digitize all.
He's I think he's just gone through. And
All right, we're going to go back. Those of you who are still with us.
Yep, thank
We're
you.
going to go back to the camera museum.
Oh, okay.
His other hat.
Oh, okay, well.
you're taking a picture of the phone.
Yeah. Back in Paul's studio. And this is the sort of reception area for the studio. And back here is the so-called camera museum. Some aerial cameras on
Aerial
the
cameras
floor.
on the floor. Yep.
Kodak and other folders. Some books. These photographers are not part of the collection.
Well, we're old enough to be part of it. They just haven't asked us.
The, I mean, it's a treat to be in here and see all the, it's like a military speed graphic.
Froze again.
All the roll film formats you can't get anymore. Let's see it again. 116.
If you need some Nikkor reels for the 616, I've got them.
Okay, good. It's good to know. Some Weston meters. Quite a few Polaroids.
Yeah, stereo cameras, Polaroids, movie camera.
8mm movie, I think. Whoa.
Yep.
There's maybe a 16mm up there.
Hand crank Kodak stuff.
Lots of Instamatics,
Yep.
some brownies. Just some really nice ones.
Yeah, colored bow brownie,
Yeah.
early Kodak.
Remember in the end when
That looks, is that a
It's an all vista panoramic camera with a replaced
Yeah.
Bella.
yeah.
And then a Kodak panoramic next to it.
Oh, I got my hand over finger over the lens. This is
That's a Kodak, original Kodak. It looks like her Kodak #2 next to the wooden camera on the left.
yeah.
And there's a radio, combination radio camera that's centered there, 1930s.
That's cool. These are well,
Yeah, Kodak
I'll
Retina.
turn it upside down so I can. Some miniature spy camera kind of stuff.
The Stylophote, the one that looks like a pen.
My dad had.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
My dad took diamonds to Japan.
Some bunch of twin lens reflexes.
Yep.
Some Argus C3s up there, I recognize.
The bricks.
Yeah. And there's Bob Markow again. And here's a juxtaposition of a.
Yep.
Yeah. Here's a Crown graphic. And so have you been to this place, Jeremy?
No, I
Have you
haven't.
seen this? Well, you gotta come in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a compass, the little the silver camera in the corner. It's a Swiss. That's a full frame 35mm camera that you can wear on your wrist. It's got a reflex mechanism in it. It takes special cassettes that you have to reload on. But, they're very cool. It's actually an SLR, so it's got a reflex viewer.
Wow.
You can see in the top.
That's mine. I have one just like that too.
Now, which one is
Yeah,
the
there's-
spy camera?
So there's some more.
Yeah, more vintage folders and
Yeah. So yeah,
very cool.
I think. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for
I
the
think-
tour. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I think we're gonna stop it there.
I'll be back in Arizona in about a week and I guess I get there about the 17th for about a
Okay.
week and days. I'll give you a buzz when I get in. See if we
Yeah,
can find a
please
time
do.
to get together.
Okay. All right. If there are no questions from the online people, we'll end the event. Thank you very much for attending, everybody.
Good luck recovering from carrying that iPad all the way through.
I got to
Thank you
get
very
better
much.
at that. I can't get any worse. So, but thanks again for attending. Take care.
Okay, we'll catch up with you later. Bye-bye.
Signing off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for sending me the link, Fred.